Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'll be taking my look at some of the main points brought up by both Keir Starmer for Labour and Ian Blackford for the SNP in Prime Minister's questions yesterday on the 5th anniversary of the referendum, which Boris Johnson, amongst others, lied their way through and is still not able to point out a single related promise that has been kept. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, I'm not particularly in the habit of observing anniversaries for the sake of it. Sometimes I've done a video to mark one, often I've not. Didn't do anything to particularly mark yesterday, like the 5 years since our day of national self-harm. So I didn't expect either Starmer or Blackford to do likewise. Starmer because Labour seem to have no idea how to play the subject and are rather hoping the whole thing will just go away. Blackford has no such concerns as it doesn't represent a source of infighting for his party, so he's free to talk about Brexit whenever he likes. But he didn't bring it up either, neither brought it up, they didn't have to. In fact, for a laugh, neither of my videos yesterday was about Brexit. This one is not going to be the same. Well, this video isn't about Brexit, but I don't choose the topic for PMQs. That's down to Starmer and Blackford. The next one will be. At PMQs, Blackford was asking about the latest reveal of Tory corruption. Now, an emergency COVID contract used to funnel public funds intended to battle the virus to be used for political campaign purposes, how he put it. In this case, polling on opinions about the Union of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, on this occasion not the European Union. Specifically, this was about the views of Scotland in or out of the UK, so it was the whole issue related to Scottish independence. Now, we knew about this a long time ago. This wasn't breaking news that this thing had happened. I talked about it last year. But in light of the fact that the High Court did recently rule that the award of the contract was unlawful, it has become newsworthy again for a different reason and, of course, of importance to the SNP. Actually, there are a few layers of this particular story in terms of right and wrong. Some may think the whole premise of using public money for this sort of contract is wrong. But that is debatable. What is not debatable is that it was unlawful because the government awarded it using legislation intended only for emergency COVID measures. Asking people for their views on Scotland's place in the UK was neither an emergency nor related to COVID. Actually, given that they apparently used the information from this polling, if you recall, to suggest that the way to save the Union was to pretend to go on a camping holiday in Scotland and stick pictures of the Union flag on vials of vaccine that the people receiving them will never see, I might even suggest that it wasn't just a misuse of public money, but a complete waste of money. Johnson tried to deny much knowledge about the contract. Blackford tried to point out the fact that, well, the Prime Minister doesn't seem to have a clue what's going on then. I think I might have been tempted to point out that the Prime Minister was seemingly unaware that his own government had just been found in the High Court to have acted unlawfully, again, and was suggesting that he didn't know much about it. Now, if a government has been found in a High Court of breaking the law and the Prime Minister doesn't know about it, that would suggest to me that either the government breaks the law so often that Johnson simply can't keep up with it all, or that he pays no attention to anything that's happening at all. I might even have asked him which of those two things was true. After all, Johnson, he never actually properly answers the second question anyway, because there's no third from Blackford. He never actually answers the first one properly, but at least Blackford can poke holes in that. Then Ian Blackford called for an inquiry into the misuse of public funds. Johnson then tried to defend it by saying it was so that the UK could fight COVID together. Oh, so now you know what the contract was about. OK, you do now know what it's come to mind, has it? Now that Blackford can't come back at you. Even so, I'm not sure how young or stupid you'd need to be to fall for that. I'm thinking maybe an underdeveloped 4-year-old at best. It would be easy to point out that if Boris Johnson really wanted the UK to fight COVID together, which I will say would have been a smashing idea, he would have discussed matters with both opposition and devolved leaders from the start. During the first wave, he was essentially telling other political leaders, including the First Ministers of Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, what to do rather than discussing anything. In fact, he didn't even attend his own emergency meetings for months, didn't he? For, what was it, the first 5 Cobra meetings on the COVID emergency he missed, didn't attend. Even later on, the discussions with other leaders were sporadic. They tended to take place only when he was looking to try and palm off a bit of blame for upcoming lockdowns. But like I say, we don't know whether Blackford would have pointed that out or not, because he only gets 2 questions. Although I don't think necessarily a third would have made that much difference. Starmer got 6, and he used them to attack the government's record on rape convictions. In actual fact, this is part of a whole heap of crap caused by years of government underfunding of the criminal justice system. The government have recently tried to claim that the pandemic created a hell of a backlog, which if you're following any barristers at all on social media, you'll know to be nonsense. They have been talking about the growing backlog for years, long predating the pandemic. It's not rocket science. If you close down courtrooms, you can't have as many cases being heard, can you? It's obvious. If you introduce a new IT system that doesn't work for years and leads to entire days being written off because the judge can't actually access the information they need, you can't have as many cases heard. Properly funded facilities are what's needed, not banging on about making sentences tougher or even introducing more criminal offences. I mean to say, how is criminalising peaceful protests supposed to help deal with a backlog that already means cases can take years to be brought to court? Which is another massive reason, of course, why rape convictions are so poor. A combination of a whole mess of things, and I don't want to make it sound simple, but you can start off by noting that many things in our society are dealt with a lot less effectively when it's something that predominantly only affects women. Take medicine, for example. It takes years for women to be diagnosed with endometriosis. Really doesn't matter what section of society we're talking about. If it's something that basically doesn't affect men, it's really very poorly resourced. That's been obvious enough to me as a bloke who hasn't had direct personal experience of any of these issues. So you have the problem that rape, which is predominantly an attack of women by men. Not exclusively, but predominantly. And you already have a policing system that is unsympathetic. Because this isn't at the court's end of things where it all falls apart. The policing end of things, it's pretty bad. You add on to that the fact that it is a deeply traumatic event in a victim's life, then tell them that they're going to have to keep building themselves up mentally for their day in court, which arrives and is then cancelled and put back a few more months. Sometimes cancelled on the day itself. You get up that morning, you've got yourself ready, your head's in the right place, and then you're told it's cancelled. And this can drag on for years. Imagine the toll that puts on someone. This is a big part of why the conviction rates are crap. But Boris Johnson kept waffling on about how Labour should back tougher sentences. You know, they should back their moves. When the most recent vote on the issue had Labour voting for longer sentences, specifically for this crime, and Conservative MPs voting against it. Voted it down, in fact. Now, I don't want to get into that nonsense myself. Talk of tougher sentences. It's one of the, I am aware it is the political game that both Labour and the Conservatives have to play. I get that. I don't blame them for it. But it's a complete red herring. When you actually talk to people within the criminal justice system, they know that's a nonsense. See, the idea is, if we make the sentences tougher, that will deter people from committing the crime. It's like a crime prevention thing. No. It doesn't deter people if they don't think they're going to face those sentences. Like, people don't commit serious crimes if they think they're going to get caught, usually. Very few people would. You have to improve policing and conviction rates before any would-be perpetrators even start to consider the impact of the sentence on themselves. Because it doesn't matter what the punishment is. If you don't think you're going to be convicted, it could be 10 years having to lick Anne Widdecombe's feet every morning, and it wouldn't put you off if you don't think you're going to get caught. Or if you did get caught, you wouldn't get convicted. And this was another classic case of Johnson being particularly lost at sea. Let's be honest, he doesn't prepare properly for these cross-examinations at the best of times. He relies entirely on pointless sound bites. But he was always onto a loser, trying to argue the toss on the criminal justice system against the country's former top prosecutor. Starmer doesn't need to do much preparation for something like this. It's his area of prior expertise. And I noticed at one point, Johnson said, the only thing that I sort of thought, oh, okay. He said that 40% of new police recruits were women, which would help. Which I think probably the only sensible thing he said in the entire exchange. Only, then I thought, how much does it help though? I would accept that that does help because at the moment, there are only a little over 30% of police officers are female. So 40% of new recruits will move that number upwards. But it's only going to move it by a small amount. It won't actually make much of a mark on the current problem for a number of reasons. Like the first is that's still well under 50%. If you've already got fewer than 50% of women on the police force, you actually need to recruit more than 50% of new recruits have to be women in order to get anywhere near closing that balance. It's no good a bigger number under 50%. It's better, it's still not going to deal with the issue. So that balance of the force is still going to be heavily male dominated. Secondly, these are recruits he's talking about. They're not going to be in charge of investigations for years. Thirdly, it's all very well talking about increasing the proportion at the recruitment end, but what about the advancement side of things? No good having more female plods if investigating officers are still almost all men. You know, what's the percentage of female officers finding advancement? Fourth, what's been done about the culture within the police force itself? Because we can't expect to improve the situation for women facing abuse with the hope that, well, maybe when they report it, they'll get a female officer dealing with the complaint. We need a complete culture change in both the police and society so that it makes no difference who is investigating a crime. It will be carried out properly and the victim handled appropriately. None of this was in Johnson's answer. Stick a few more women on the beat and that will deal with the issue, seemed to be his response. And it was an interesting contrast, I thought, between Boris Johnson against Ian Blackford and Boris Johnson against Keir Starmer this week. So against Blackford, what you notice is, what he was doing was defending unlawful behaviour from his government as being justified because he had a good reason for it. So essentially there, his tactic was to deny that the problem existed. And this is the way it goes now. It was a really strange dichotomy. So against Blackford, it was like the problem doesn't exist. Against Starmer, not so much denying a problem as he often does, because this problem is both undeniable and an issue for potentially half the voting public. There's no minorities to dismiss here. In fact, I think there may actually be more women than men in the UK as it happens slightly. So because he couldn't distract us away from the problem, because the problem is clearly there, he switched instead to trying to distract us from the cause. So because the cause is something the government could do something about if they wanted to, he instead tries to blame something that is more difficult for the government to deal with. So instead of denying that the problem exists, he denies the causes of the problem. That way, as he sees it, he won't be blamed when the problem is still here at the next election, because he will put the blame on a cause that's got nothing to do with him. More tricks that couldn't possibly work if we had better news outlets for the public. In other news, Peter Stevanovich's video exposing the lies that Boris Johnson keeps telling in Parliament is now up to almost 24 million views, and the BBC are still refusing to report on that. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.